Come on, let's get talking. Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk with Carl E. Long, episode 64. In my last episode, I said episode 33 when I meant 63. Sometimes I don't know what I'm saying, and you don't know until you hear back. But welcome to episode 64 of Let's Talk with Carl E. Long. And if you're new to my channel, thank you for joining me. And if you're one of my regular listeners, welcome back. As always, my goal isn't to tell you what you think. My goal is to encourage all of us, including myself, to think critically, ask questions, and have conversations that too often never happen. So today's episode, guys, was kind of different because y'all know that Donald Trump came out and he had this press conference he wanted to do, and he wanted to talk about the election. So everybody was like, whoa, what is he going to talk about? He's going to talk about that freaking 2020 election that he lost and how he just thinks he won this election. Something's wrong with Donald Trump. He lost fair and square. And so this whole election thing came up again about elections, and his press conference ended up being how he's telling us, which we've already knew, that our elections have been vulnerable to China and Russia and people like that. And so he wanted to give this big degree that he had some intelligence. He wanted to tell the Americans. Now, everybody and all the pundits, everybody that's talking politics right now, all the creators and everybody, we're all talking about how he's trying to sow distrust into the 2026 election to make you think that something is wrong. Now, I want to tell you right now, vote. Don't listen to Donald Trump. He's delusional. Vote. He's going to try everything he can to not have this election change his Congress and Senate. Donald Trump is running scared, y'all. If we have a Democratic Senate and we have a Democratic House of Representatives, he's going to have to answer to some things, and he's afraid. He's afraid because he's done some stuff, and his little Republican cronies are sitting back there just letting him. His DOJ is not indicting people. They're not doing what they're supposed to do. So he's afraid because he's done a lot of wrong, and he knows it. And which is quite strange, though, is that Donald Trump, in spite of him trying to buck the law a little bit, he kind of has to respect it because he has no recourse without it. But when he's president, he's got that armed National Guard. He's got all this stuff behind him. He's a pretty powerful figure in this world, and you really can't mess with him. But once we get this Congress and Senate over his butt, I think he's going to squelch down and start doing what's right. So today's episode is one of those conversations I want to be very clear from the beginning about what this episode is and what is not. This episode is not about claiming that the 2024 president election was stolen. I'm talking about 2024 presidential election. So today's episode title is The Story the Media Won't Cover. Why isn't anyone talking about this election study on the 2024 election? So Donald Trump, when he came out with this press conference, he made me start thinking about, I wonder what's going on with that group called the Election Alliance that did all this study on 2024. I did a podcast on it. This guy was a guest on Roland Martin's podcast, and now he's been a guest on another podcast, another reputable podcast in September of just last year. And it's starting to gain some traction on what their studies are, because these are not like little dumb conspiracy theory people. These people are studying data. They're called the Election Alliance. So I want to be very clear that this episode is not about claiming that the 2024 election was stolen. It's not about declaring that anyone has proven any spread election fraud. Instead, this episode asks a different question. Why hasn't there been more mainstream news coverage of an independent report that argues there are statistical anomalies in the 2024 election and calls for further investigation? Yes. Whether you ultimately agree with the report or disagree with it, I think it's worth asking why it hasn't been become part of a broader public conversation. I'll tell you why. Because Donald Trump has made a mockery of the 2020 election and his claims, which he's tried everything and say this was stolen. And every case that he's tried, every court case, every litigation, he's lost. There's no evidence. He has no friggin' evidence. But this 2024 election has some things that you need to look at. The claims that Donald Trump are making, yes, maybe there have been some illegal aliens put on the register and whatever. You know what? But it's not that much. It's minuscule. If that is the case, still not enough to call election fraud. It's not enough. So he may be bringing up some claims that we need to fix. Yes, states need to fix that stuff. No illegals should be voting. Not at all. Taking some water, y'all. So, because if a democracy is on, but if a democracy depends on trust, then transparency matters. And transparency begins with asking questions. Why election integrity matters. One thing I've noticed over the last several election cycles is that concerns about election integrity often become partisan. After the 2020 election, many Republicans questioned the results. After the 2024 election, some Democrats, independent researchers, and election watch groups have raised questions about aspects of voting data. Here's my position. Election integrity should never belong to one political party. If you're a Republican, you should want secure election. If you're a Democrat, you should want secure election. If you're an independent, you should want secure election, no matter who wins. Because confidence in our elections shouldn't depend on whether our preferred candidate wins or loses. Now, the reason why I say this now, and I don't want to ever think that I'm on Donald Trump's train. I'm thinking elections are not secure. They're secure. But because we've had a lot of foreign interference with things, and with the new AI and with technology, it doesn't hurt to look at some of the stuff that's been going on. Now, Donald Trump was talking about some things that we had already known about. He didn't give us anything new that we didn't know about. But did it affect an election where it changed the outcome? We don't know. And I'm not on Donald Trump's train, no, by no means. But the thing about Donald Trump, he's only concerned about the elections that he lost. Why aren't you caring about what happened in 2024? Was there any fraud there, Donald Trump? If we wanted to cheat and win an election, we wouldn't have let your butt win in 2024. We would have cheated our way in, right? Like we cheated our way in for Joe Biden, as you say. So why didn't we do it for Kamala? Doesn't make any sense, Mr. Trump. What we're talking about is just ludicrous and stupid. So I need to separate us from the whole 2020 debacle of him saying election fraud, because that's not what we're talking about, okay? Make sure I make a clear distinction. I'm not agreeing with Donald Trump about anything at all when it comes to that election and the validity of it all. But I'll have to give him this point. And I don't think that he's doing this. He's not doing this because he cares about elections. He's doing this because he cares about something that may have happened in the 2024 election. And he's setting the stage. He's setting the stage to say that it's foreign interference. Now, with the 2024 election, I don't know how much foreign interference there was. I don't know if it was American influence. I don't know who influenced to change some of the stuff that they're making points of here. I don't know that Donald Trump doesn't know anything about it. I don't know, but he's acting really strange about elections all of a sudden. And this guy is a master of keeping himself out of trouble. He's got some crazy people around him, but he's setting the stage for something. We don't know what. But I'm going to throw this in as a caveat. No matter who wins, because confidence in our election shouldn't depend on whether our preferred candidate wins or loses. A healthy democracy should welcome transparency. Now, let me share something personal. I didn't go looking for election studies. I didn't. I wasn't sitting around trying to prove something happened. I mean, in fact, after the election, I was just trying to make sense of what I had witnessed over previous several months. And honestly, something just didn't feel right. You had to be there right with me. Something didn't feel right. It didn't feel right. I mean, I'm sitting here watching all of this. Y'all know how Kamala got in the election. Baby, there was a fire behind the Democratic Party. There was a fire behind Kamala Harris. She worked her butt off, going from swing state to swing state. I mean, the crowds were overwhelming. Things were it just didn't feel like a loss to me. Something was off. And I mean, I follow these guys. There's one guy, his name is Alan Lichtman. You can look him up. He has been a predictor of who wins elections through his little method that he has. I can't remember the name of his method right now. But even this guy was wrong. And I'll take it even further, and this is kind of comical. All of the people that consider themselves mediums and psychics, they were like, something ain't right. They were questioning their psychic abilities. That's how off it felt. Something just didn't feel right to me. Now, before anybody jumps to conclusions, let me explain what I mean. I'm not saying feelings are evidence. They're not. Feelings don't prove anything, but feelings can cause you to ask questions. I trust my feelings. I consider that to be the Holy Spirit. I trust my intuition. I trust what it tells me. Because 9 times out of 10, it's always right. And that's exactly what happened to me. I didn't feel like this was right. So as I watched the campaign unfold, it felt like almost every indicator was pointing in one direction. There seemed to be tremendous enthusiasm surrounding Vice President Kamala Harris. Social media was buzzing. Her rallies were drawing huge crowds. As I said, volunteers appeared energized, and many polls suggested a highly competitive race. Though polling overall showed a close contest, and different polling averages reached different conclusions. I always knew it was going to be a tight race. We always knew that. But a lot of those polls, Kamala was just edging a little bit. Donald, it was just so close, we didn't know what was going to happen. Now, granted this, Donald Trump, and I had thought this too, even though these studies are out saying that something's happened, I had to think about, there's a lot of people that still hated Barack Obama, and there was no way they're going to let a black person of any sort, especially a black woman, get in there. So there could have been this wave, a change of whatever, and Donald Trump truly did win the popular vote. There could have been. I felt that way because, there was so much misogynistic attitudes out there against women, against black women, against Kamala. It was just a lot. But the enthusiasm and the way that campaign was run was amazing. It was amazing. And then there was Donald Trump's rallies. They weren't filled. I mean, after a while, there was nobody even going. It was looking like everything was just dropping off for him. I think that people were starting to understand there's no way we're going to elect this crazy fool again. So that was the feeling that I had. I mean, even though polling showed a close contest and different polling averages reached different conclusions, there still was Alan Lichtman, I told you about. For decades, this guy has been known for his presidential forecasting model. He publicly predicted Harris' victory. When the election results came in, even he said he was surprised and has since reflected on why his model missed that race. The man had to go back and think, does this working now? And then there were people outside traditional politics, which I said I even saw commentators, including some describe themselves as psychics or intuitives, forecasters, who had independently predicted a different outcome and later expressed surprise at the actual results. Now, does that prove anything? No, it does not. Absolutely not. Predictions are not just predictions. Some are right, some are wrong. And there are so many different people using different methods, all expected to expect one outcome, and something very different occurred. I found myself wondering what happened. And then there was some of Elon Musk's public comments. Y'all know what he said. Yeah, before and after the election that sparked even more discussions online. I don't trust the guy. The guy is a computer genius. I don't trust him. I don't trust what he may have done. I just don't. Something is not right. He said some things about there was a thing where he was already tapped in. He was getting election results before the tabulating machines. How do you do that? And why are you doing that? And how did you tap into the machines to get the results? How are you getting the results? The way the TV stations and everything, is that a public source that anybody can get? I don't understand that. So that sparked a little bit of suspiciousness for me. I mean, his comments before and after the election were strange. Again, I'm not presenting those comments as proof of anything. I'm simply telling you what made me pause and begin asking more questions. That's when I started reading. That's when I started looking at reports. That's when I came across the Election Truth Alliance. Not because I had already reached a conclusion, because I wanted to understand whether there were credible questions being asked. Is anybody going to challenge this? It was so close. And how those questions were being addressed. Every president will go and have a recount here and there. Hillary did it. It doesn't matter. You can do that independent. And if it comes out you're wrong, you're wrong. So there's no reason to do that. You see, there's a big difference between beginning with a conclusion and looking for evidence to support it, and beginning with a question and being willing to accept whether the evidence ultimately shows that's where I am. I'm still asking the question. I'm still learning, and I think that's where all of us should be, not afraid to ask questions. This 2024 election, I still don't think he won. I don't think he won. That's me personally. Now, the Election Truth Alliance, recently I came across the work of them, Election Truth Alliance, again. They published a report analyzing the voting patterns from the 2024 election. Now, according to the organization, they believe they've identified statistical anomalies that they argue deserve additional examination. Importantly, the organization calls for further investigation and expanded hand audits of paper ballots. Now, their public materials present these findings as reasons to investigate further. This guy that's talking, this is a smart guy. These are not like people that are just out there doing conspiracy theories. These are smart guys that do data. So I had to ask ChatGPT about data and trends and things of that nature, and if you've been in corporate America, we talk about the bell curve and how this data looks different because something's wrong. You can usually tell when something's off based on the trends and whatever. And that's exactly kind of the work that they do. So, their public materials present these findings as reasons to investigate further, not as definitive proof that election outcomes were manipulated. But that distinction matters. Evidence that raises questions is not the same thing as proof. They're two different things. I get that. So what does the report actually say? So the report discusses statistical patterns that authors believe are unusual enough to warrant closer examination. Among the topics they discuss are statistical voting anomalies, differences they believe merit additional review, questions about voting patterns in certain jurisdictions, and recommendations for expanded independent audit and hand count verification. Again, these are report claims and interpretations. Whether those interpretations are ultimately correct is something that requires independent verification. That's why the authors say additional auditing would be valuable. Now, the question that caught my attention is the part that made me stop and think. Not necessarily the report itself, but the reaction to it, or more accurately, the lack of reaction to it. Why hasn't this report become a larger national story? I mean, Roland Martin covered it on his podcast, and Mr. Isaac here, I think that's his name, that I'm going to show you a little bit of it, covered it on his podcast, but this guy's not been invited on mainstream things because none of these mainstream want to be considered being conspiracy theorists, and I know they deal in fact, but they can do this. They could at least talk to the guy and find out where he stands. They can at least talk to the guy. So that's what my thing is. Why is it the lack of reaction? Why hasn't this report had a larger national story? That's a question I think is worth exploring, guys. Now, there could be explanations. Perhaps editors and journalists have reviewed the report and concluded it isn't persuasive enough to cover. I don't know what they're looking at. They're looking at the same thing I'm looking at. Perhaps they're waiting for independent experts or election officials to validate or challenge its methodology. These guys actually wrote a letter to the campaign of Kamala Harris after the election to tell them to please do an audit. They just got crickets. Why? Maybe, or perhaps, the misinformation and false claims that circulated following the 2020 election, many news organizations have become much more cautious about reporting on election-related allegations before they are independently verified. I get that. Those are all possible explanations as to why major news has in trouble with this. But asking why sometimes some things receive a little more attention is itself a reasonable question. I mean, the shadow of 2020, I don't think we can discuss that topic honestly without acknowledging what happened after the 2020 election. Many claims of widespread election fraud were investigated. Some were rejected by courts. Some lacked supporting evidence. Some were amplified well beyond what the available facts supported. That experience understandably changed how many journalists approach election stories today. They scared y'all. They won't do it. News organizations may now be much more reluctant to report on election-related claims unless they have strong, independent confirmation. That's an understandable instinct, but here's another question worth asking. Can becoming so cautious that legitimate questions also get overlooked? Two things can be right, guys. I mean, finding the right balance isn't easy. We know that. And we want to avoid spreading misinformation. I don't want to spread misinformation. That's why I'm being cautious with this podcast here. But at the same time, we don't want to discourage good faith research or thoughtful scrutiny. These guys are going from state to state, swing state, all of them. They're going through and they're doing it. I mean, two goals can exist and they can coexist. Verification is not the same as accusation. One of the things I think we need more of in America is precision in our language. There's a difference between asking for verification and accusing someone of wrongdoing. Okay? There's a difference between raising a question and declaring a conclusion. I'm raising a question. There's a difference between identifying statistical anomalies and providing election manipulation. Those distinctions matter. So if someone publishes research, that research should be examined on its merits. If it's flawed, explain why. If it's incomplete, explain what's missing. If it's compelling, investigate further. That's how science works. That's how journalism should work, and that's how democracy should build public trust. Should every election be audited? I mean, that brings me to a broader question. What if the routine audits became standard after every major election? That's not a bad idea. Not because we expect fraud, not because one party demanded it, not because transparency itself builds confidence. Imagine if every close election included bipartisan audits, public reporting, and clear explanations of the results. Wouldn't that increase your trust? It would mine. I don't mind them doing that. I don't think it's a conversation worth having. I should say, I think it's a conversation worth having. That is a conversation worth having. We need to do this, guys. Whether you're conservative, whether you're liberal, or somewhere in between, stronger verification processes could benefit everyone. We need to verify these elections better. Why independent research matters? Independent researchers have often contributed valuable questions in many fields. Sometimes their work has been validated. Sometimes it has been disproven. Either outcome can move understanding forward. So the important point is that evidence should be evaluated carefully. That doesn't mean accepting every claim. It also doesn't mean dismissing every claim without examination. Healthy skepticism, guys, cuts both ways. So let me let you listen to a little bit of the Election Alliance interview. And guys, in this podcast, or you're looking at a clip or whatever, I'm including the link to the study and the interview. You can look for yourself. You can go to the site for yourself and look these things up at what they've said. But I'm going to play a little bit of his interview, and then we'll come back and discuss.
Cut out the things we think are less effective and put in. And I can maybe tell you just a few examples of what we are finding.
Well, what I would rather do is just there were a couple things I wanted to ask about. And then I think maybe that might be best left for a second interview. But so my audience knows right now, you've talked about Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Nevada in this interview as published stuff. That would still give Trump 271. Is it your belief right now as you speak to me, based on everything you have published and not yet published, that Donald Trump did not genuinely win the 2024 election?
As of right now, every set of data and additional evidence that we have found points to a serious concern that our election system could be compromised. It could have changed the outcome of not only the presidential election of the 24, but it could have also impacted state, Senate, and House positions that would go on to impact Congress.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to say to my audience and encourage them to do, which is what I'm going to do. Nathan has laid out this case. He's provided some visuals. The first thing I would do is now I'm going to go and first try to verify that the data Nathan's working with is accurate. That's the first thing, is the input data accurate. I'm then going to evaluate his conclusions, delve more deeply into differential diagnoses, and that's the process I will start to use to make a decision. And then what I would love to do, Nathan, is after you have more to reveal, and after I've had a chance to do that, we could have you back and have another conversation.
Yeah, that would be great. Our data is actually, our methods and our data is public at data.electiontruthalliance.org. We built a dashboard, digital dashboard, so you can actually go download the data for yourself, compare it to the county and state reports, right, and then you can do your own method or analysis or apply our method analysis yourself on the dashboard.
All right, we've been speaking with Nathan Taylor, Executive Director of Public Engagement for the Election Truth Alliance. Nathan, I appreciate you being here. Of course, this is opening up a very serious potential can of worms, which we're going to investigate. I look forward to speaking to you again.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and I have a lot more to share.
If you sit on the toilet.
All right, so there you go. That is from the David Pakman show. He's a legitimate podcaster. He had him on there, and they talked about this. So let me show you this heat map that all kind of started this right here. All right, so this is an example of a heat map that shows how the data has been done. And they compared this to two countries there, guys. two countries, Russia and Uganda, who typically do not have free and fair elections, and this is how their data looks. This tail. If an election is going to be pretty much standard and the data looks good, you get a more healthy circle like you did in the model in the third column. A healthy circle. But if you look over to the left of the screen, the square by itself, that is our 2024 elections. And what makes that even more crazy is that only happened in the swing states where it appears that maybe Donald Trump's numbers were spiked by something. That's what they're appearing. That's what he's saying. That's what he's saying. So that's the heat map that all that came from. So healthy skepticism cuts both ways, guys. We should be skeptical of extraordinary claims, but we should also be willing to look at evidence with an open mind. What would it take? Let's think about honesty. Think about honesty. If the Election Truth Alliance concerns are ultimately shown to be incorrect, then transparent reviews could help explain why and strengthen public confidence. If some concerns are validated, then identifying and fixing problems would also strengthen confidence. Okay? That's why discussions about election administration shouldn't automatically become partisan battles. The goal should be trustworthy elections, not predetermined conclusions. Okay? So, some of my final thoughts about this whole debacle is this election deal is a big deal. I want to leave you with democracy at the strongest when people have confidence in the process. That confidence comes from transparency, it comes from accountability, it comes from evidence, and it comes from the willingness to help, to ask difficult questions while also following the facts wherever they lead. Whether that report ultimately proves persuasive or not is something that should be evaluated through careful analysis where appropriate. The question I'll leave you is this: should independent election research receive more public discussion, even if its conclusions remain contested? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I mean, have you read the report? Do you think it deserves more attention? Go and read the report. You can go to the link that I provided for you. Or you think it's important questions are overlooked. I think this deserves some attention, guys, because something is not right. Something is not right. And one of the examples that he gave was one of the counties that counts all their votes. Yeah, they count their votes by hand. Some precincts do and some don't. Why is it that the ones that counted by hand were closer to right concerns were the ones that didn't the ones that they I lost my train of thought. But anyway, I lost my train of thought on that. So, as I wrap up this episode, I want to share something deeply personal. The reason I'm talking about this today isn't because I want to relive the 2024 election. It's because I'm thinking about the future, guys. I'm thinking about the upcoming midterm election. And I'll be honest, what I experienced in 2024 left me uneasy. Not because I can prove something happened, I can't. Not because I've reached some final conclusion, I haven't. But because I wanted to walk away with questions that in my mind still haven't fully been answered. That uncertainty is what worries me. I'm concerned that if large numbers of Americans, regardless of political party, don't feel confident that elections are transparent and verifiable, we're going to keep repeating the cycle of suspicion, division, and mistrust. It makes me nervous as we approach another election. Not because I'm predicting that something improper will happen from either party. Walking away from another election feeling the way I felt in 2024, I can't go through that. Wondering if every reasonable question receive a fair hearing. I don't want to go through that. I don't want Democrats to feel that way. I don't want independents feeling that way, because when confidence in our elections begin to erode, everybody loses. Not because they guarantee different outcomes, but because they can help the public understand why the outcome should be trusted. If there are no significant problems, then let's demonstrate that through transparent processes. If improvements can be made, then let's make them. Either way, our democracy becomes stronger. My hope isn't to convince you of any particular conclusion. My hope is much simpler than that. I hope we become a country that's confident enough to ask difficult questions, patient enough to investigate them, and honest enough to accept the answers, even when those answers challenge our own assumptions. Because at the end of the day, our loyalty shouldn't be to a political party. Our loyalty should be to the truth. Whether you agree with me or disagree with me, or you're somewhere in the middle, I hope you still stay in the conversation. Read the report yourself. Listen to different perspectives. Challenge your own assumptions. And challenge mine if you think I'm wrong. So I want you to know that I put the entire link to the Alliance Studies interview with the David show, and you can look at that, and then you can also go to their site and look at all the reports they've done on this subject. So guys, we got to be vigilant. We got to stay up. We got to remember what's going on and make sure that we get this country back on track like it's supposed to be. Yes, like it's supposed to be. So that is my podcast for today. I hope you had a wonderful day. And thank you so much for joining me. Bye now.